So this video is really a very quick overview of using Adobe Camera Raw, which is part of Adobe Photoshop. You can see I'm using CC 2017 just to pull out some detail in the shadows of an image if you've underexposed it, or if you're having to shoot in high contrast conditions. So I'm going to start, I know this is slightly off screen, but this is the file menu in Photoshop. So I'm just going to go File Open or Command O. And the file that I want to use is this one here. As you can see, it's very dark. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Open. Now, the file itself, this is the name of it down here. It tells you that it's a RAW file, it's an RW2 file. Your RAW files may have different names. They could have extensions of NEK, I think ACW is another one, DNG for digital negative. It really depends on the make of the camera, but they're still RAW files. If it has .jpg, it'll have to be handled a little bit differently. So this is what the Camera Raw window looks like. It looks a little bit like Photoshop. Here's my image. And as you can see, I have a list of sliders down the side. Now we're going to keep it simple. This is really beginner's Camera Raw. There's a lot of other things that you can do with this. It's really quite a powerful program. But all I want to do is make these buildings a little bit brighter, but I don't want to lose the detail in the sky. It's very simple. I want to add shadow detail. So I want to bring up my shadows because my shadows right now are too dark. So all of it that's in the shade is too dark. So if I go to the left, it darkens it. To the right, it lightens it. So I'm going to push that way up. And now you can see that I have pretty good detail in the buildings, and they're lit very nicely there. Now my sky is looking a little bit bright. My sky is my highlights, so I'm just going to bring those down a little bit, and you'll notice that sky getting darker as I bring it down. I also have the option of changing whites and blacks. I very rarely ever change those. That blacks is the blackest part of the image. If I move this, I can certainly make it higher contrast, or I can make it lower contrast, and you're welcome to play around with it, but that's essentially what blacks and whites do. They are the darkest and the lightest parts of the image. So all of these are under this here called Basic. They're the very basic functions of Camera Raw. What they allow you to do is what we call global adjustments. So other things I can do here is I can do vibrance. And you can see what vibrance does. It tends to make some of the colors pop. Saturation does a similar thing, but it changes all of the colors at once. And so you can choose which you think is the one, or you can use a combination of vibrance. So I could pull up those bluer buildings a lot more with vibrance, the pinker buildings in the sky a lot more with saturation. Be really careful not to overdo it. It's very easy to overdo changes to the vibrance and saturation and make your image look very, very fake. So up here we have our histogram. Our histogram shows exactly where our midtones are, and as you can see, I've got pretty good detail in my midtones, and then fading out to the shadow areas, and incidentally, these are called the blacks. These are the shadows where the grey rectangle appears. This is your exposure, this is your highlights, and this is your whites. Now the one thing that I very rarely ever change if I don't have to is the exposure. But if your exposure is wrong, So all of your histogram is lumped over one side, it means it's underexposed. If it's all lumped over to the right, it's overexposed. It means you've got too much highlights, too much shadows. So you can also adjust exposure, which will lighten the whole image, or you could lower it to bring some of those back. And this looks slightly better with a very small exposure adjustment. Plus 0.25 is a quarter of a stop adjustment on the camera exposure. And there you have the finished image. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. So this is how you recover highlights and shadows in your images. There's a little bit of an art to it. You can make it look very overdone or overworked, but too painterly, but so that you get the gist of what you're doing. This is all that you need to do in Camera Raw, is just these very basic adjustments on here without going into any of the other settings to bring some of those details back. And it's one of the first things that you should learn about Camera Raw. You can do the exact same thing in Lightroom, it just takes a couple of other steps. Once you're done, you have two choices. You can hit done and it will save this. So if I hit done, I can now go ahead and reopen the image. And there'll be an embedded XMP file here. This is what the Camera Raw file is reading to find what changes we've made. And now if I open it up, there you'll see that was the image that we saved. Another thing you can do is you can open the image in Photoshop if you want to edit it in Photoshop. Or over here on the far left, we have Save Image. And so you can just hit Save Image and change that. A DNG is a digital negative file, which is still a RAW file, but you'll probably want to save it to something like a JPEG for submission to class. Just remember to change the name. So I might call it Houses with the file extension JPEG. And those are the only two things that you need to change. It's going to go into it's not going into the right folder actually. I want to save it in the same location. So it'll go into the location that it was before. That was where I was saving other work previously. So the three things that you may need to change on here if you save it is save in same location, and then change the name of it down here, make it a JPEG, and just check your settings. So I've got it on high settings, and then go save, and that will have actually saved it. I'm going to do this though as well. I'm going to open the image in Photoshop. So if you found that save image all a bit much, just open it up in Photoshop, and just like you would in Microsoft Word or any other program, go to your File menu, go Save, and choose JPEG, and name it whatever you want to name it. This is the name of the actual place, Sigashwara, and then choose the settings. And I usually choose around 11 for the compression, the extra compression it gives me, and then click OK. And so now I not only have the Camera Raw file, but I also have a JPEG of it. So if I go to open this again, you'll see in here I have the Sigashwara Houses JPEG. That was what I saved through Photoshop. I have Houses JPEG. That was when I did the save image that was in Camera Raw. And here I still have my original RAW file that I can open up. So if I go and hit open, here's my RAW file, and I can come back and now make other changes to this. So the raw file doesn't get damaged when you save it as a JPEG or a TIFF or a PSD or anything like that. It embeds this. If I ever want to set it back to the defaults, where it says basic across the top, I can click here and choose, sorry that's slightly out of camera, but the second one down is camera raw defaults, and it will take it back to what it looked like when I first opened it, and I could re-edit the whole thing in a different way. Or I can click the preview setting, which is the second icon in, or you can just hit P to preview it, and that will show you the before and after. And so you can leave it set to the before, or you can leave it set to the defaults. So hopefully that gives you the very basics of what you need to know for editing in Camera Raw for this class. I honestly don't think you need to know much more. As you go more into advanced digital imaging and photography, yes, you do need to know a lot more. But just getting started in Camera Raw, this will get you there. And it's a very straightforward way of doing it, just with Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw, which is built into Photoshop.